So I'm joined here with Michelle and Charlotte. I'm going to give them a chance to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Michelle Wiltz, Managing Director of Paid Social.
And I'm Charlotte Littlewood, and I'm the Fund Director.
Okay, so we had just heard about how the whole ecosystem in paid social has changed, especially in Meta. But I want to take a step back to the days of opening your Meta campaign and you see heavily segmented campaigns, not enough creative to feed those campaigns. The algorithm is just completely starved for signals and you have no idea which creative is being served to what audience. If that sounds familiar, you are not alone, and we have all been there. And really the big kind of pitfall that we identify when we work with clients is that when brands only iterate on a winning set of creative, they're going to hit a ceiling. So if you continue kind of identifying that winner and just changing small, subtle things on your creative, you're going to really hit a point where that performance is going to be dried up, diminishing returns. So it's really important to think about how do you protect those winners, right? Because we're not saying, hey, completely do away with that. We want to protect the ROAS there, but we also want to create a system that you're continuously identifying net new creative winners, because that way you'll have a full winning system, hopefully, right? And you drive ROAS through your entire account. So we're going to cover the 4 stages of this creative system. Charlotte and Michelle will go into depth about all of these, but I'll just introduce them lightly. So at stage 1, it's reading the signals. The Meta team did a great job speaking about all of the signals that are available within the platform. But if we take a step back from those signals that the platform is picking up, you need to understand where those are in terms of your audience. So how do we actually identify your audience insights correctly so that we can then create creative that maps back to those? That's where the build with intention comes in. So we identify those signals and then we translate those signals to a creative strategy that allows you to serve the right creative in the right contextual setting. We then test structurally, super important, maybe a little nerdy, and we will nerd out on this subject, but having a structured way of testing is incredibly important because otherwise you're kind of in a chaos of a bunch of different tests. And then you can't identify what actually wins. And then we'll move on to talking about how do you scale and protect your creative ecosystem.
Amazing. So first up, we've heard from Meta how much we need to be creating that diversification in content. So the first thing we want to do is understand what of your content is currently performing, and that's where our content intelligence tool covers it. So within the tool, what we're able to do is at scale, understand what is driving that performance to your audience. So we can toggle it to see, is it static content, is it video content, and really what's driving those CPMs. It also is intelligent enough, it can understand, is it a hook that's been able to capture the audience? Is it the creative? Was it emotive? And it's through this that we're able to then suggest smarter testing so that we can create more content for you at scale to be pushing out onto the platforms. And then the next stage is really ensuring that you're creating content for all of your audiences. I think one of the main things that we see is that you have a view of who your audience is. And as the Meta team have said, we want to be creating a vast array of content, and you have an audience outside of who you believe your audience to be. And this is where the Bite Sites tool comes in. So if you haven't seen this graph before, this is a proprietary tech of ours, and this is how we display the information. So you've got engagement rate across the x-axis and ego rate on the y-axis. And the size of the bubble is indicating the volume of conversation that's happening around that moment. So this is an example for a spicy noodle brand, and we wanted to see what are those conversations that are happening outside of where they believe their full audience to be sitting. So really what we're wanting to see is something in this top right-hand corner to show that there's great view growth rate as well as engagement rate. But actually all of these types of conversation are a great opportunity for us to be thinking of content that be created, that's diverse, that's different, and reaching those new audiences. There isn't one tool that does all of that. I'd love to sit in this room and say, we have this one tool that does everything. We really have to extend outside of just Bite Sites to really understand what the audience and what their behaviors are looking like. So adding into that Bite Sites data, what we do is review your audience. Who do you feel your target audience is? Where do they live? What age are they? Are we creating content that they're actually going to want to engage with? That's a really core part of making sure that your creative is going to be strong. The second part is sentiment analysis, and this is, I think, one of the biggest growth areas for us in that we're able to analyze at scale sentiment across TikTok content as well as Meta content. And that's really allowing us to see what are those conversations that are happening within your audience segment. Are you showing up in a positive manner, in a neutral, in a negative? And a great example of this actually is we ran sentiment analysis for said spicy noodle brand. And we realized that actually people were enjoying making the noodles with milk versus hot water, which was a completely new insight for them and meant that all of our creatives is now going to start to kind of, encourage milk consumption with it.
Creator milk partnership for
And then the final part to it is extending it kind of outside of the core social platforms to really understand what's happening across Google, across Reddit, really analyzing text content as well to know, again, what type of content is really going to resonate for your audience. And the beauty of all of this is when it all maps together. So Adidas is a client of ours, and through the content intelligence tool, we were able to understand that actually the audience was most inclined to engage on content that was really visually strong. And as I'm sure you can understand, Born by Anderson, very aesthetic, and it really mapped well for Adidas as a client. So through the Bite Sites tool, we were able to identify that within a day of that trend starting to peak, seeing that e-growth rate and the engagement rate. And then within 3 days, we got content live, and within 24 hours, over 1 million views, 16% engagement rate. And one of the main things within this is the importance that the client came onto this before everybody else did. So as you can see, Adidas were one of the first to point onto this trend before our additional brands. And I'm now understanding that Kickers is definitely a UK brand and potentially not one that the US audience will know. But the point of this is really just to demonstrate that, yes, the content will live and people were still talking about this content through to May 21st. But we really want to find those opportunities for you so that you can be at the very front of this and be part of that social conversation as it unfolds.
Awesome. So we heard a lot about how we capture those signals. And honestly, going back to this slide, I cannot capture the importance of this enough. This is huge within itself, being able to jump on a trend that early on. And then the amplification that you can do after this is absolutely insane and could be really monumental for your ROAS. But building on those signals. So when you think about, okay, now I know where my audience is, I know all of the signals that I need to react to, how do I actually translate that into a creative strategy? So when we look at our creative strategy here, we also have the pleasure of working with Estee Lauder. So we were able to showcase this beautiful customer journey from essentially your discovery phase to all the way to the conversion phase. I think another important thing to call out here is that we're all marketers in the room and we appreciate a funnel, right? We start at the top of the funnel and we like to map down to conversion. But as Lindsay and Eric had mentioned, there really is no linear consumer journey. So although we're mapping it out in a way where we're thinking about each type of creative at a different stage in the process, ultimately you should be thinking about this from a matching contextual layer standpoint. So you still want to satisfy, there are still some traditional elements here where you want to make sure you have enough discovery content and you have enough conversion-based content, but you want them to tell a holistic story. So if they are seen out of sequence, it's not oh, why am I getting hit with a conversion-focused ad when I've never even heard of this brand? So here's the journey that we built out for Estee Lauder, and some of this creative is actually produced by us, and we have some motion animators and folks on our creative team that are able to build this. And then our wonderful creator team has actually produced the creative ad here. And if you want to talk more about influencer marketing, we have Pia in the audience today. So come get her after this and chat influencer marketing. But this is a really smart way to diversify your creative portfolio, starting with hi-fi brand and then going all the way to your middle of the funnel where you want to build that authenticity and credibility with your audience. Creator content, honestly, that's where creator content is amazing. I can't tell you how many times I've been baited into buying so much random stuff because a creator was, relevant to me and said that you must own this. So I did what every millennial does and press buy. And then, sometimes you need a little bit of additional convincing and frequency. So then you move into your promotional messaging and your creative catalog as well. And this is an interesting moment to kind of run this simultaneously and contextually based, because then you can identify also what the right messaging and what the right pricing strategy or discounting strategy is for your brand. A lot of brands will lean very heavily into the conversion focused piece because they want to see that ROAS and platform. But you do have to understand this first piece of the equation to know how much you can actually drive through just lower CPMs and not so much conversion focused behavior. And then really focus your discount messaging and your more conversion focused messaging on that audience that really needs to be convinced that, they need to purchase your product.
Yeah, and so now moving into testing more structurally, it's not more testing that you want to do, but just testing more thoughtfully and more smartly. So Meta, the Q&A kind of stole my thunder for these couple of slides.
We'll run it back because it's really good.
Yeah, we'll run it back and kind of double click on everything. But obviously, in the past, audience segmentation is where a lot of our learnings came from. We would segment out audiences, optimize within them. I remember as a campaign manager breaking out genders, placements, age demographics, anything to really tell me any insight into the audience that I was looking at and how I could potentially improve performance. But now that has completely shifted to the creative side. You know, what is resonating well from a messaging standpoint, formats, actual content within the visuals that we're seeing, you know, like how long does the video need to be in order to really hit your audience most effectively? So it has really shifted. And that being said, though, audience is obviously still very important, audience targeting. So in the next slide here, we definitely encourage you to continue setting up your campaigns effectively and smartly. But this approach, the Cerebro approach, is what we've been doing at Brainlabs that we have found the most success when testing our creatives. And it's an important call out here to really ensure that we're leveraging more broad audiences, but then also suppressing any audiences as well to minimize any overlap within our audiences. So that way, when we're putting forward creative in front of them, especially testing different creative options, that we are able to capture analyses of every sort of insight for the creative. So we're able to report back on what recommendations for future creative developments we can put forth. And I know what you're thinking when you hear all the creative testing. You tend to be like, well, sheesh, I don't really have the budget to be developing so much creative to really test all these different functionalities. But as the Meta team mentioned earlier, you know, organic is having a resurgence of sorts, and it's the perfect opportunity to really understand how your potential future paid creative can actually perform just within the natural organic space. So in this instance, for one of our advertisers, and leveraging the bite-size tool that Charlotte talked about earlier, we were able to identify over 40 different organic influencer assets for our Bell's client and rotated into over 90 different placements within programmatic and paid social, and continue that momentum for those organic assets and really amplify performance there. So TLDR, what we always recommend doing is testing organic first. This is where you'll be able to really understand how your creative is performing. So that way you're not wasting your media dollars or creative development dollars really, and focusing them where it matters. And that's where the performance is being dictated, while also simultaneously receiving insights into what's actually resonating with your targeted consumer group.
Important call out, check your influencer contracts and make sure paid social is included in there, because you're going to want to amplify some top performing organic creative.
And this is, of course, all grounded in measurement, of course. And the way that we validate all of our incrementality and the metrics that really matter, not just the vanity metrics, we leverage geolift studies, casual impact analysis, and honestly, our measurement team does such a great job in having quite advanced set of measurement options for you, depending on what the overall goal is for the business. So really, there are endless options, and these are just examples, but we always want to prove back just the most important metrics and how it relates to your brand to ensure your business is growing, and not vanity metrics like impressions or clicks, which are great to know, but not really impactful to driving business results. And now the fun part, scaling. So now once a concept proves viability, then we're able to act much more swiftly. With a lot of our creative intelligence tools that Charlotte also showed through earlier today, we're able to really leverage technology to understand what sort of variations we should make based off of past results that we've seen with your creative, and move much more quickly than we were ever have been able to in the past. So obviously in the past, this had would take days to do, creative analysis, talk to the creative development team, share every learning that we've been able to put together. But now it's just at the touch of a button, takes minutes to really put together what hooks would really resonate, what video recommendations as well we can put into your video assets based off of different peaks during the video assets as well. So really a terrific tool to help make us not only understand performance well, but to also act more nimbly and swiftly. And then we've been talking about tests quite a bit now, and I bet you're wondering, what do we do with all this information? How can we keep track of it? And considering how Brainlabs really talks about how our love for testing and our methodology around there, we have technology that is proprietary to Brainlabs called Hippocampus that anonymizes our experiments across the board for all our advertisers. So that way, when we're putting forward creative recommendation, product recommendation, strategy, we're taking a look at all of these various experiments and then applying it to our strategy to put the best route forward for your campaigns to really drive performance.
A personal anecdote around this is that when we look at this stuff, we also log the type of objectives that the campaigns are running on. And there's some really interesting hacks that you can identify by looking at some experimentation that we've done across different objective stages within Meta that sometimes actually influence different metrics. So not going against the grain of saying use the conversion objective when you want conversion, but there are some things that you can do for competitive arbitrage and like identify where brand awareness objective could actually still drive ROAS for you, but at a lower CPM. So this is always exciting when we can find an insight like that, because we have 35,000 experiments in here. So someone was bound to think of it, tested it, and inputted it in, which is always fun. All right, so you've heard a lot about all of these different parts of the system, but really the key thing is if you're feeling just like overwhelmed by all of the data points that we've mentioned here, like you don't have to start off with fancy architecture or like, workflow map and data integrations of all of this stuff. The key thing here is that this system really powers well through coordination. So when you're thinking about your creative, your media, and your data, it really works in one loop. So even as silly as this sounds, like if you haven't chatted to your creative person in a couple of days, or you haven't chatted to your data person in some time, like this is a good opportunity and a good reminder to just remember that these three things need to work in unison in order for this system to work. And really the key places where they break down is when these teams are extremely siloed and they're all doing great work, but it's not being circulated back. So start P0, just talk to the folks on these teams and think of yourselves as an ecosystem versus, oh, I'm responsible for creative, I'm responsible for media, I'm responsible for data. Oh, we're ready to be put on the hot seat. Thank you.
How does Brainlabs creative intelligence tool stack up against other creative solutions like Motion? I'm happy to take this. So I have leveraged quite a bit of different creative intelligence tools, Motion, Atria, and our Brainlabs creative intelligence tool is very advanced and on par to it. If JT was here, who is the developer on it, he would be very modest, but I hype him up way too much. There are so many terrific features in comparison to Motion that I feel are lacking in Motion and that we actually already have. And we're still in the development phases of adding different platforms. And it's already so advanced, in my opinion, that it's surprising to me that it's not further along, because there are so many terrific tools where you're able to more specifically dive into the actual video content of that our creative intelligence tool and have AI essentially inform us of what in the video could we essentially improve from a formatting, a visual perspective, and also just content within the video, which I don't think any creative intelligence tool has something like that, where it's like we noticed at second 4 that there was a big spike, most likely because there was a dog in the video. To me, that's crazy and not available in any other creative intelligence tool that I've seen. And I have also found that the other intelligence tools really rely heavily on you prompting AI to ask, what are the insights? What's the recommended hook and visuals that we should put forward? In our tool, it's much more automatic. You see an ad, you click on it, and you have a whole descriptory of different insights and recommendations that you could apply to your future creative. Forgot I had the phone. Sorry. Does Meta prioritize those ads? Oh, I think that's an older question. Oh, I think that's the only Brainlabs question then.
Okay, sounds good. Well, without further ado, you guys just sat through a lot of content. So this is when your cards are going to come in handy. And we're